This is HOA Neighbor Court, and the timeline is absurd. I am standing in the guest parking lot of Harborview Reserve with a stack of boxes in my arms, and the treasurer of the HOA is filming me while a tow truck backs toward my van. I moved to Portland, Maine 6 months ago for a fresh start after my divorce. I drive for a delivery company, UPS-style uniform and routes, and I thought living in Harborview Reserve would be quiet and normal. The HOA seemed fine at first, just basic rules about trash days and lawn height. Then I realized certain homes get special treatment, and everyone knows it. The board president lives in the lakefront section and never gets cited for anything. The rest of us get notices for every tiny infraction. The treasurer is a middle-aged woman named Deborah Foster, who goes by Carol in the neighborhood, and she has made it her mission to weaponize parking rules against anyone she does not like. I am at the top of her list because I park in guest spots during my morning deliveries when I drop packages for residents. Carol is standing 10 feet away with her phone held high, recording me, and she is smiling. She is wearing a blue windbreaker and a black bucket hat, hair pulled into a ponytail, and she has a clipboard and a clear plastic sleeve tucked under one arm. The tow truck driver is already lowering the wheel lift under my rear axle. I can hear the hydraulic whine and the clang of metal on metal. I cannot risk missing custody time with my daughter because of HOA hearings and court delays, but Carol does not care about that. She wants me out of this neighborhood, and she is using every fake rule she can invent to make it happen. I set the boxes down on the curb and pull out my phone. I start recording back. Carol notices, and her smile gets wider. She says, "You think this is petty. I think this is my purpose." I say, "You cannot tow me from a guest spot while I am actively making a delivery." She says, "You are not a guest. You live here. Guest parking is for visitors only, and you have been abusing it for months." I say, "I am working. I am dropping packages. That is not abuse." She says, "Keep arguing. You are making my case for me." The tow driver is a guy in his 40s with a company logo on his vest. He does not look at me. He just keeps working the controls. I step closer and say, "Did she show you authorization paperwork? Did she show you a signed tow order from the management company?" He does not answer. Carol steps between us and says, "I do not need a signed order. I am the treasurer. I have full authority to enforce parking violations." I say, "Show me the rule." She pulls a folded paper from her clipboard and waves it at me without letting me touch it. She says, "Section 12-4-3, guest parking is restricted to vehicles displaying a valid guest pass issued by the management office. You do not have a pass. You are in violation." I say, "I have a resident decal on my windshield. That is my proof I live here." She says, "Resident decals do not grant you guest parking privileges. You need a separate pass for every visit." I say, "Every visit? I live here." She says, "Exactly. So you should be parking in your assigned spot, not taking up guest spaces that paying visitors need." I say, "My assigned spot is on the other side of the complex. I cannot walk a quarter mile with a handcart full of packages every morning." She says, "That sounds like a you problem." The wheel lift clamps onto my axle with a loud snap. The driver starts reeling it up. My van tilts backward. I feel my chest tighten. I say, "Stop. I am calling the police." Carol laughs and says, "Go ahead. They will tell you the same thing. This is private property, and you are in violation." I dial. The dispatcher takes my information and says an officer will be out shortly. I hang up and look at Carol. I say, "Fine. Let the cops sort it out." She says, "I have all day." The tow driver finishes securing the lift and walks back to his cab. I step in front of the truck and say, "You are not leaving with my van until the police confirm this is legal." Carol says, "That is obstruction. I can add that to the violation report." I say, "Add whatever you want." I am not moving. She turns her phone toward my face and says, everyone is going to see how entitled delivery drivers think they can park anywhere and ignore HOA rules. I say, everyone is going to see how you make up rules to harass people. She does not blink. She just keeps recording. I keep my hands open and my voice calm, because the real move was still ahead. A couple sitting on a porch across the parking lot is watching the whole thing like it is a show. The man has a coffee mug in his hand, and the woman has her phone out. I wave at them. Carol notices and says, do not drag the neighbors into this. I say, they are already in it. They are watching you abuse your position. She says, I am enforcing the covenants. That is my job. I say, show me the covenant section you just quoted. Let me read it. She pulls the paper back and tucks it into her clipboard sleeve. She says, you can request a copy from the management office during business hours. I say, or you can show me right now since you are using it to authorize a tow. She says, I do not have to justify myself to you. The cop arrives 10 minutes later, a Portland PD patrol car with lights off. The officer is a woman in her 30s, calm and professional. She walks over and asks what is going on. I explain the situation, pointing at my van and the tow truck. Carol interrupts twice to say I am a habitual violator and she has been documenting my behavior for weeks. The officer asks to see the HOA authorization paperwork. Carol hands over the clipboard. The officer flips through the plastic sleeve and pulls out a single printed page. She reads it, then looks at Carol and says, this is just a list of parking rules. It does not authorize a specific tow. Do you have a signed order from the property management company? Carol says, I am the treasurer. My authority is inherent. The officer says, that is not how towing works on private property in Maine. You need documentation showing the vehicle owner was notified and given a chance to move. Or you need a management company work order. Carol says, he has been notified multiple times. I have sent letters. I say, I never received any letters. Carol says, I have proof of mailing. The officer looks at me and says, did you receive certified mail or any formal notice about parking violations? I say, nothing. Carol pulls out her phone and scrolls through photos. She shows the officer a picture of a bright orange windshield sticker that says violation in bold letters, no readable details. She says, I placed this on his windshield 2 weeks ago. I say, I never saw that sticker. If you put it on my windshield, someone removed it before I got back to my van. The officer hands the clipboard back to Carol and says, without a proper tow order and without proof the vehicle owner was notified and refused to comply, I cannot allow this tow to proceed. Release the vehicle. Carol's face goes red. She says, this is absurd. He is in violation right now. Look at him. He is parked in a guest spot. The officer says, he is also a resident and he is actively making deliveries. That is not grounds for an immediate tow without notice. Carol says, so he just gets away with it? The officer says, you can file a complaint with your management company and go through the proper process. But you cannot tow someone without documentation. Carol turns to the tow driver and says, do not release it. I am calling my attorney. The driver looks at the officer, then back at Carol. He shrugs and starts lowering the wheel lift. Carol shouts, I said do not release it. The driver says, lady, I am not getting sued over your HOA drama. The cop says release it. I am releasing it. The lift retracts and my van settles back onto the pavement with a thud. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The officer tells me I am free to go and suggests I document everything from now on. I thank her and she leaves. Carol storms off toward her car without another word. The tow driver climbs into his cab and pulls out of the lot. I stand there for a minute, heart still pounding, and realize this is not over. She is going to escalate. She is not the type to let something go. I finish my deliveries and head home. My assigned parking spot is tucked behind Building C, a long walk from the guest lot where most of the package drop-offs happen. I park and check my mailbox. Inside is a thick envelope with the Harborview Reserve Association logo printed on the front. I open it and find a certified letter demanding $300 in parking violation fees and pretending the parking addendum is law. The letter is dated 5 days ago, but the postmark shows it arrived today. My certified mail arrived late, and Carol is treating it like my choice to ignore her. I read the letter twice. It references Section 12-4-3 and claims I have violated guest parking restrictions on 14 separate occasions over the past 6 weeks. It lists dates and times. It says I owe $50 per violation, plus a $100 administrative fee. It says I have 10 days to pay, or the HOA will place a lien on my property. I do not own my unit. I rent it. The lien threat is meaningless, but the letter is written like I am a homeowner. I check the envelope again. It is addressed to me, but the unit number is wrong. It says Unit 42. I live in Unit 52. Someone in the HOA office either made a typo or Carol gave them bad information. I take a photo of the letter and the envelope. Then I call the management company. The receptionist puts me through to a property manager named Luis. I explain the situation and read him the letter. He puts me on hold for 3 minutes, then comes back and says, "I do not see any record of parking violations filed against your unit. Can you give me the date on the letter?" I read him the date. He says, "That is strange. We did not send that. Who signed it?" I look at the signature line. It says, Deborah Foster, Treasurer, Harborview Reserve Association. Luis says, Carol does not have authority to issue fines on behalf of the management company. She can report violations to us and we process them, but she cannot send demand letters directly. I say, "So this letter is fake?" He says, "It is not official. I will need to see a copy. Can you scan it and email it to me?" I say, "I will send it now." What happens next? He says, "I will forward it to our legal team and we will send Carol a cease and desist if she is issuing unauthorized fines. In the meantime, do not pay anything. If she keeps harassing you, document it and let me know." I hang up and send the email. Then I sit in my van and think. Carol is not going to stop. She already tried to tow me this morning. Now she is sending fake fine letters. She is escalating fast, and I need to stay ahead of her. I pull out my phone and check my dashcam footage. I installed a front and rear camera last year after someone sideswiped me in a grocery store parking lot. The footage is stored on a cloud account, and I can access it from anywhere. I scroll back to this morning and find the clip of the tow truck arriving. Carol is visible in the frame, standing beside the driver and pointing at my van. She gestures at the guest parking sign and then at my vehicle. The driver nods and starts backing up his truck. Carol pulls out her phone and starts recording. The whole thing is on video. I download the clip and save it to my phone. Then I check the previous 2 weeks. I find 3 more clips of Carol walking through the parking lot with her clipboard, taking photos of vehicles and guest spots. In one clip, she places a bright orange windshield sticker on a sedan. In another, she writes down a license plate number. In the third, she stands beside a pickup truck and talks on her phone, gesturing at the vehicle like she is describing it to someone. I download all the clips and create a folder. Then I text my friend Jake, a local journalist who covers city politics and real estate disputes. I say I need advice. My HOA treasurer is harassing me with fake fines and illegal towing attempts. Do you know anyone who can help? Jake replies 5 minutes later. He says, "What kind of harassment?" I send him the video clip of this morning and a photo of the fake fine letter. He calls me immediately. He says, "This is insane. She tried to tow you while you were working?" I say, "She has been targeting me for weeks. She keeps saying I am abusing guest parking, but I am just doing my job." He says, Do you have proof the parking rule she is quoting is fake? I say, the cop said she did not have proper authorization, and the management company says they did not send the fine letter. He says, that is not enough. You need to prove the rule itself is bogus. Get a copy of the actual covenants and compare them to what she is claiming. If she is misquoting or inventing sections, that is your smoking gun. I say, how do I get the covenants? He says, they are public record if the HOA is registered with the state. You can also request them from the management company. If Carol is blocking access, that is another red flag. I say, she told me to request a copy during business hours, but she did not say where or how. He says, call the management company and ask for the full covenant document. They have to provide it. If they refuse, file a complaint with the state attorney general. Maine has strong HOA disclosure laws. I say, what about the towing? Can she just keep trying until she gets a driver who does not care about documentation? He says, probably. She is weaponizing the tow vendors. If she has a relationship with a specific company, they might do whatever she asks without checking. Your best defense is to make sure your vehicle is always in compliance and keep recording everything. If she tries again, call the cops and show them the covenant proof that her rule is fake. I say, what if she retaliates? She already sent a fake fine letter. What is stopping her from filing a small claims lawsuit to force me into court and waste my time? Jake pauses. He says, that is a real risk. If she files a frivolous claim, you will have to respond or risk a default judgment. But if you have proof her claim is baseless, the judge will toss it and you can countersue for harassment. I say, I cannot afford to spend weeks in court. I have custody time with my daughter and I cannot miss visits because of HOA nonsense. He says, then you need to shut this down fast. Get the covenants, prove her rule is fake, and escalate to the management company or the board. If she is acting outside her authority, the board has to rein her in or they are liable. I hang up and call Luis back. I ask for a full copy of the Harborview Reserve covenants and bylaws. He says he will email them to me by end of day. I thank him and hang up. The management office closes at 5 and I have one shot to deliver a formal dispute packet in person if I want to make sure it gets processed before Carol tries something else. I check the time. It is 3:30. I have 90 minutes. I drive to the management office, a small building in a strip mall on the edge of town. Luis is at the front desk. I hand him a printed copy of the fake fine letter and the dashcam footage on a USB drive. I say, I need this on record. Carol Foster is harassing me, and I want documentation that I reported it. Luis takes the USB and the letter. He says, I will log this and forward it to our attorney. We will send Carol a formal warning. If she keeps sending unauthorized letters or trying to tow residents without proper process, we will remove her from the board. I say, how long does that take? He says, depends on the board. They meet once a month. The next meeting is in 2 weeks. I say, she is not going to wait 2 weeks. She already tried to tow me this morning. Luis nods. He says, I will send the warning letter today. If she violates it, we can pursue an emergency board vote to suspend her. I say, what about the towing rule she keeps quoting? Is it real? Luis opens a binder on his desk and flips through laminated pages. He stops on a section labeled parking and reads for a minute. Then he looks up and says, there is a guest parking policy, but it does not say residents cannot use guest spots for deliveries or short-term parking. It just says guests need a pass if they are staying overnight or parking for more than 4 hours. I say, so she is lying. He says, she is misinterpreting. Whether that is intentional or not, I cannot say. But the rule she is enforcing does not exist in the covenants. I say, can you give me a copy of that section? He makes a photocopy and hands it to me. I fold it and put it in my pocket. I say, thank you. He says, be careful. Carol is vindictive. If she thinks you are going after her, she will double down. I say, she already doubled down. I leave the office and drive back to Harborview Reserve. The sun is setting and the parking lot is half empty. I park in my assigned spot and walk to my unit. As I approach the door, I see another bright orange windshield sticker stuck to the glass panel beside the entrance. It says violation in bold letters with no readable details. I peel it off and take a photo. Then I go inside and lock the door. I sit at my kitchen table and open my laptop. I check my email. Luis has already sent the covenant document, a 40-page PDF with sections on architecture, landscaping, parking, pets, and assessments. I scroll to the parking section and read it carefully. Section 12-4-3 says guest parking spaces are reserved for visitors of residence. Visitors must display a guest pass issued by the management office if parking overnight or for extended periods exceeding 4 hours. Residents may use guest spaces for temporary parking related to loading, unloading, or deliveries, provided the space is not occupied for more than 30 minutes at a time. I read it twice. The rule is clear. I am allowed to use guest spots for deliveries as long as I am not there for more than 30 minutes. Carol's claim that I need a separate pass for every visit is completely false. The rule she quoted does not exist. I screenshot the section and save it. Then I scroll through the rest of the document looking for anything about fines or towing. I find a section on enforcement that says the management company is responsible for issuing violation notices and collecting fines. The board can recommend enforcement actions, but cannot issue fines directly. Any towing must be authorized by the management company and preceded by written notice to the vehicle owner. I screenshot that section too. Then I check the bylaws. There is a clause about board member authority. It says the treasurer is responsible for financial reporting and assessments, but does not have unilateral enforcement powers. Any disciplinary action against a resident requires a majority board vote. I have everything I need. Carol has been acting outside her authority, misquoting the covenants and issuing fake fines. She tried to tow me without proper authorization, and she has been harassing me with stickers and letters. I have proof of all of it. I send Jake a text with the screenshots. I say, got the covenants. Carol has been lying. The rule she keeps quoting does not exist. He replies, that is huge. What are you going to do with it? I say, not sure yet. I reported her to the management company, but they are slow. She will escalate before they act. He says, you need leverage. If you wait for the management company to handle it, she will keep coming after you. You need to force her hand. I say, how? He says, go to the next board meeting and present your evidence. Make it public. If the other board members see she is lying and acting outside her authority, they will have to do something or risk liability. I say, the next meeting is in 2 weeks. She could do a lot of damage before then. He says, then escalate sooner. File a formal complaint with the board president and copy the management company. Demand an emergency meeting. If they refuse, threaten to involve an attorney. I think about it. The board president is a guy named Tom who lives in the lakefront section and never responds to emails. I have sent him 2 messages in the past and got nothing back. But if I copy the management company and frame it as a liability issue, he might pay attention. I draft an email. I attach the screenshots of the covenant sections, the fake fine letter, the dashcam footage, and the photos of the orange stickers. I write a short summary explaining that Carol has been harassing me with fake rules, unauthorized fines, and illegal towing attempts. I say her actions expose the HOA to legal liability, and I am requesting an emergency board meeting to address the issue. I copy Luis and Jake and hit send. I get an auto reply from Tom saying he is out of town until next week. I get a reply from Luis 15 minutes later saying he will forward my email to the HOA attorney and recommend an emergency session. No reply from Jake because he is not on the board, he is just a witness. I close my laptop and try to relax. My daughter is coming to stay with me this weekend, and I cannot let Carol's drama ruin our time together. But I know she is not done. She is the type who sees any pushback as a personal attack and doubles down. The next morning, I wake up to 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I check my voicemail. The first message is from a towing company saying my vehicle has been flagged for removal and I need to contact them immediately to avoid additional fees. The second message is from the same company saying they have already dispatched a truck to my location. The third message is from Carol. She says, "I warned you. You should have paid the fine." I throw on clothes and run outside. A tow truck is parked beside my van with its amber lights flashing. A different driver is hooking up the wheel lift. Carol is standing on the sidewalk with her clipboard watching. She sees me and smiles. I say, "You cannot do this. The management company told you to stop." She says, "I am not doing anything. The towing company is enforcing the parking policy." I say, "There is no policy that allows this. I have the covenants." "You are lying." She says, "I do not care what you think you have. You are in violation, and you are being towed." I pull out my phone and call 911. The dispatcher says an officer will be out shortly. I hang up and step in front of the truck. I say to the driver, "Did she show you a signed tow order?" He does not look at me. He just keeps working. I say, "You are about to tow a vehicle without authorization. That is illegal." Carol says, "He has full authorization. I signed the order myself." I say, "You do not have authority to sign tow orders. Only the management company can do that." She pulls a paper from her clipboard and waves it at me. She says, "This is my authorization. I am the treasurer, and I have full enforcement powers." I say, "Show me the signature from the management company." She does not respond. She just tucks the paper back into her clipboard and turns away. The driver finishes hooking up the lift and starts reeling it in. My van tilts backward. The cop arrives 10 minutes later, same officer as yesterday. She walks over and I explain what is happening. I show her the covenant screenshot on my phone and the email confirmation from Luis saying Carol does not have tow authority. The officer asks Carol for the signed authorization. Carol hands over the clipboard. The officer reads the paper and says, "This is just a handwritten note saying the vehicle is in violation. It is not a signed work order from the management company." Carol says, "I do not need a work order. I am the treasurer." The officer says, "We went over this yesterday. You cannot authorize a tow without proper documentation. Release the vehicle." Carol's face goes red again. She says, "This is harassment. He is using the police to avoid consequences." The officer says, "Ma'am, if you keep attempting to tow this vehicle without authorization, I will cite you for filing a false report." Carol says, "False report? He is in violation." The officer says, "According to the covenant document he just showed me, he is allowed to park in guest spaces for deliveries. You are misrepresenting the rules." Carol does not respond. She just turns and walks away. The tow driver releases my van and leaves without a word. The officer tells me to keep documenting everything and suggests I file for a restraining order if the harassment continues. I thank her, and she leaves. I get in my van and sit there for a minute. My hands are shaking. Carol just tried to tow me again less than 24 hours after being told to stop. She is not going to quit. She is escalating, and I need to do something bigger. I call Jake. I say, "She just tried to tow me again." The cop stopped it, but she is not backing down. He says, "You need to go nuclear. File a police report for harassment and get a restraining order. Then file a formal complaint with the state attorney general about HOA abuse." I say, "Will that stop her?" He says, "It will put her on notice that you are serious. If she violates a restraining order, she gets arrested. That usually makes people think twice. I say, what about the board meeting? Should I still push for that? He says, yes. You need to get her removed from the board before she does something worse. If the board refuses to act, you have grounds for a lawsuit against the HOA for allowing harassment. I hang up and drive to the police station. I file a formal harassment report and provide all the documentation, the fake fine letter, the dash cam footage, the photos of the orange stickers, and the screenshots of Carol's unauthorized towing attempts. The officer taking the report says they will forward it to the prosecutor and I should receive a case number within a few days. He says I can use the report to apply for a restraining order through the district court. I leave the station and drive back to Harborview Reserve. My daughter is arriving in 3 hours and I need to clean the apartment and pick up groceries. I cannot let Carol ruin this weekend. I spend the afternoon getting ready. I put away the HOA paperwork and try to focus on normal things. But every time I look out the window, I see Carol walking through the parking lot with her clipboard. She is taking photos of vehicles and writing notes. She is building a case against someone else now. My daughter arrives at 6. Her name is Emma, and she is 8 years old. She runs up to the door with her backpack and gives me a hug. We spend the evening cooking dinner and watching a movie. I do not mention the HOA drama. I just try to be present and enjoy the time we have together. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more wild HOA tales. On Saturday morning, Emma and I go to the park. When we get back to Harborview Reserve, there is another orange sticker on my windshield. This one is stuck to the driver's side window. I peel it off and throw it in the trash. Emma asks what it is, and I say it is just a parking reminder. She does not push. On Sunday afternoon, Emma's mom picks her up. I hug her goodbye and watch her drive away. Then I go back inside and check my email. There is a message from Luis with the subject line emergency board meeting scheduled. The email says the board has agreed to hold an emergency session on Tuesday night to address my complaint about Carol. I am invited to attend and present my evidence. I reply and say I will be there. Then I spend the next 2 days preparing. I print out all the documentation, the covenant sections, the fake fine letter, the dash cam footage screenshots, the photos of the orange stickers, and the police report. I organize everything into a binder with labeled tabs. I write a short presentation summarizing Carol's actions and explaining why she needs to be removed from the board. On Tuesday night, I drive to the clubhouse where the board meetings are held. The room is small, with a folding table at the front and rows of plastic chairs. Tom, the board president, is sitting at the table with 2 other board members. Carol is sitting in the front row with her clipboard. There are about a dozen other residents scattered around the room. Tom calls the meeting to order and says we are here to discuss a complaint filed by a resident regarding parking enforcement. He asks me to come forward and present my case. I stand and walk to the front. I open my binder and start reading my summary. I explain that Carol has been harassing me for weeks with fake parking rules, unauthorized fines, and illegal towing attempts. I show the covenant section that allows residents to use guest spots for deliveries. I show the fake fine letter with the wrong unit number and the fake signature. I show the dashcam footage of Carol instructing the tow driver to remove my vehicle without authorization. I show the photos of the orange stickers she has been placing on my windshield. Carol interrupts twice to say I am twisting the facts and taking things out of context. Tom tells her to wait until I finish. I keep going. I explain that the management company has confirmed Carol does not have authority to issue fines or authorize towing. I show the email from Luis stating that any enforcement actions must go through the management company. I explain that Carol's actions expose the HOA to legal liability and create a hostile environment for residents. I finish and sit down. Tom asks Carol to respond. She stands and walks to the front. She says everything I have done is within my authority as treasurer. The parking rules are clear, and this resident has been violating them repeatedly. I have documentation of 14 separate violations over the past 6 weeks. I sent a certified letter demanding payment, and he ignored it. I authorized the towing company to remove his vehicle because he refused to comply. This is not harassment. This is enforcement. One of the other board members, a woman named Lisa, says, Carol, did you get approval from the management company before issuing the fine letter? Carol says, I do not need approval. I am the treasurer. Lisa says, the bylaws say enforcement actions require management company coordination. You cannot issue fines on your own. Carol says, the bylaws give me discretion to manage financial matters. Fines are financial matters. Lisa says, fines are enforcement matters. They go through the management process. Tom says, Carol, did you provide documentation to the towing company showing that the resident was notified and given a chance to move his vehicle? Carol says, I placed violation stickers on his windshield. That is notification. Tom says, the covenant says written notice must be mailed or delivered to the unit. A sticker is not sufficient. Carol says, that is your interpretation. Tom says, it is not my interpretation. It is the plain language of the covenant. Carol sits down. She looks furious. Tom says, based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Carol has been acting outside her authority. The board needs to take corrective action. Lisa says, I move that we suspend Carol from the board pending a full investigation. The third board member, a man named Greg, says, I second the motion. Tom says, all in favor? Lisa and Greg raise their hands. Tom raises his hand. Carol does not raise hers. Tom says, the motion passes. Carol, you are suspended from the board effective immediately. You are not permitted to conduct any HOA business or represent the association in any capacity until the investigation is complete. Carol stands and says, this is a witch hunt. You are all afraid of him because he threatened to sue. Tom says, we are following the bylaws. If you disagree, you can file an appeal with the management company. Carol grabs her clipboard and walks out. The room is silent. Tom says, we will schedule a follow-up meeting once the investigation is complete. In the meantime, all parking enforcement will go through the management company. No board member is authorized to issue fines or tow vehicles without proper documentation. The meeting ends. I pack up my binder and leave. As I walk to my van, I see Carol sitting in her car in the parking lot. She is on her phone. She sees me and glares. I ignore her and drive home. The next morning, I wake up to another voicemail. This one is from the towing company saying they have received a complaint about my vehicle and they need me to contact them immediately. I call back and the dispatcher says Carol filed a request to have my vehicle towed for blocking a fire lane. I say I am not blocking a fire lane and I have proof. The dispatcher says they need to verify the complaint before dispatching a truck and they will call me back. I hang up and check my parking spot. I am parked in my assigned space, nowhere near a fire lane. I take photos showing my vehicle position and the painted curb markings. Then I call Luis. He says Carol is no longer authorized to file towing requests, and he will contact the towing company to confirm. He says if Carol keeps filing false complaints, the management company will pursue legal action against her. I say, she is not going to stop. He says, I know, but we are documenting everything. If she keeps this up, we will have grounds to remove her from the community entirely. I hang up and try to focus on work. I have a full route today, and I cannot afford to let Carol distract me. But every time I park in a guest spot to make a delivery, I check my mirrors to see if she is watching. That evening, I get an email from the district court saying my restraining order application has been approved. The court has issued a temporary order prohibiting Carol from contacting me, coming within 100 feet of my residence or vehicle, and filing any further complaints or enforcement actions against me. The order is valid for 2 weeks pending a full hearing. I print the order and put it in my glove box. Then I email a copy to Luis and Jake. Luis replies saying he will notify the board and the towing company. Jake replies saying this is a good step, but I should still be prepared for her to violate the order. He says people like Carol do not respond well to boundaries. The next few days are quiet. I do not see Carol in the parking lot. I do not get any more voicemails from the towing company. I start to think maybe the restraining order worked. Then on Friday, I come home from work and find a bright orange boot clamp locked onto my rear wheel. There is no sticker, no note, no explanation. Just a boot. I call the number printed on the boot. A recorded message says the vehicle has been immobilized due to unpaid parking violations, and I need to contact the HOA to arrange payment and removal. I call Luis. He says he did not authorize a boot and he will contact the vendor immediately. He calls me back 10 minutes later and says the boot was ordered by Carol using an old work order form she had on file. The vendor thought it was legitimate. I say, she is violating the restraining order. He says, yes. You need to call the police and report it. I call the non-emergency line. An officer arrives 20 minutes later. I show him the restraining order and explain that Carol ordered the boot in violation of the court order. He takes photos and says he will forward the report to the prosecutor. He says the boot company will have to remove the clamp for free since it was placed without proper authorization. The boot is removed an hour later. I take photos of the whole process. Then I email everything to the court and request an emergency hearing to extend the restraining order. The hearing is scheduled for the following Wednesday. I show up with my binder and all the documentation. Carol shows up with her own binder and an attorney. The judge listens to both sides. Carol's attorney argues that she was acting in good faith to enforce HOA rules and did not intend to harass me. I argue that she has repeatedly violated the restraining order and escalated her actions despite being suspended from the board. The judge reads through the evidence. He asks Carol directly if she ordered the boot. She hesitates, then says she authorized it before she knew about the restraining order. The judge says the restraining order was issued 4 days before the boot was placed. Carol does not respond. The judge extends the restraining order for 6 months and adds a provision prohibiting Carol from filing any complaints or work orders related to my vehicle or residence. He warns her that any further violations will result in contempt charges and possible jail time. Carol's attorney nods, and they leave. I walk out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I have in weeks. Jake is waiting in the parking lot. He says, "How did it go?" I say, 6 months. She is banned from coming near me or filing any complaints. He says, "That is huge." What about the board investigation? I say, "Still pending." The management company is reviewing her records to see if she did this to anyone else. He says, "I bet she did." People like her do not just target one person, they have a pattern. I drive home and check my mailbox. There is an envelope from the management company. Inside is a letter saying the board investigation is complete and Carol has been removed from the board permanently. The letter says the investigation found evidence that Carol issued unauthorized fines to at least 6 other residents and attempted to tow vehicles without proper documentation on multiple occasions. The management company has referred the matter to their attorney and is considering legal action against Carol for exceeding her authority and creating liability for the HOA. I read the letter twice. Then I sit down and take a breath. It is over. Carol is gone. She cannot file complaints. She cannot issue fines. She cannot order towing. She cannot harass me. The restraining order and the board removal have shut her down completely. But I know she is not done. People like Carol do not just accept defeat. They find new ways to retaliate. 2 weeks later, I get a summons in the mail. Carol has filed a frivolous small claims lawsuit claiming I owe her $300 for parking fines and defamation damages. The lawsuit claims I lied to the board and the police to get her removed and ruined her reputation in the community. I call Jake. He says, "She is trying to force you into court and waste your time. Do not ignore it. You have to respond or she wins by default." I say, "How do I respond?" He says, "File a motion to dismiss and attach all your evidence showing her claims are false. If the judge sees she is filing a frivolous lawsuit in retaliation for the restraining order, he will toss it and possibly sanction her." I spend the weekend drafting the motion. I attach the covenant sections, the fake fine letter, the police reports, the restraining order, and the board removal letter. I file it with the court on Monday. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks later. At the hearing, Carol shows up without an attorney. She tries to argue that I owe her money because I violated parking rules. The judge asks her to provide documentation showing the fines were authorized by the management company. She cannot. She just has her handwritten notes and photos. The judge asks if the management company confirmed her authority to issue fines. She says no. The judge dismisses the lawsuit and warns Carol that filing frivolous claims can result in sanctions. He says if she files another lawsuit against me without legitimate grounds, he will impose fines and possibly refer her to the bar for abuse of process. Carol leaves the courtroom without looking at me. I pack up my binder and walk out. Jake is waiting in the hallway. He says, "How did it go?" I say, "Dismissed." She had nothing. He says, "Good. Now you need to make sure the HOA knows she cannot keep doing this to other people." I say, "What do you mean?" He says, "If she targeted you, she targeted others. The management company said they found evidence of at least 6 other cases. Those people deserve to know they do not owe her money and they can fight back." I think about it. He is right. Carol probably harassed dozens of residents over the years, and most of them paid the fines because they did not know they could fight back. I email Luis and ask if the management company plans to notify the other residents Carol targeted. He replies saying they are reviewing the cases and will send refund notices to anyone who paid unauthorized fines. He says the HOA is also considering a policy change to prevent board members from having unilateral enforcement authority in the future. I forward the email to Jake. He says, "That is progress. But you should still go to the next board meeting and make sure the other residents know what happened. If you stay silent, Carol might come back in a few months and try again." The next board meeting is scheduled for the following Tuesday. I show up with my binder and sit in the back row. Tom calls the meeting to order and says the board has completed its investigation into parking enforcement practices. He says the investigation found that the former treasurer issued unauthorized fines to multiple residents and attempted to tow vehicles without proper documentation. He says the management company is issuing refunds to anyone who paid the fines, and the board is implementing new oversight procedures to prevent similar issues in the future. One of the residents in the front row raises her hand and says, "What about the people who were towed? Do they get reimbursed?" Tom says, "That is a good question. We are working with the towing company to determine how many vehicles were towed without proper authorization. If you were affected, please contact the management office with documentation, and we will review your case." Another resident says, "What happened to Carol? Is she banned from the community?" Tom says, "She is no longer on the board, and she is prohibited from conducting any HOA business. Beyond that, we cannot comment on individual disciplinary matters." The meeting continues. Several residents share their own stories of being harassed by Carol over parking issues. One man says she tried to fine him for parking his truck in his own driveway because it was a commercial vehicle. A woman says Carol placed a boot on her car because she did not have a guest pass displayed, even though she was a resident. Another man says Carol threatened to place a lien on his property if he did not pay a $100 fine for parking on the street during a snowstorm. Tom takes notes and says the board will review each case individually. He says anyone who feels they were wrongly fined or harassed can file a formal complaint with the management company and request a refund or reversal. The meeting ends and I walk out. Several residents come up to me and thank me for standing up to Carol. One woman says, "I paid her $200 last year because I was afraid she would put a lien on my condo. I did not know I could fight it." I say, "You can file a complaint with the management company and get a refund. They are reviewing all her cases." She says, "Thank you. I did not know that was an option." I drive home feeling like the situation is finally under control. Carol is gone, the restraining order is in place, the board has implemented new policies, and the other residents know they can fight back. It is not a perfect ending, but it is enough. Then I get a call from Luis. He says, "We have a problem." Carol filed a complaint with the state attorney general claiming the board removed her without due process. She is alleging that the emergency meeting was invalid because the board did not follow proper notice procedures. I say, "Is that true?" He says, "Technically, yes. The bylaws require 5 days notice for board meetings. We only gave 3 days because it was an emergency. The Attorney General is reviewing her complaint and may order the board to reinstate her pending a proper hearing." I say, "You are kidding." He says, "I wish I was. If she gets reinstated, she will have full board authority again, and we will be back to square one." I hang up and sit down. I cannot believe this. Carol is using a technicality to get her power back. If she succeeds, she will come after me harder than before. I call Jake. He says, "You need to get ahead of this. File your own complaint with the Attorney General explaining what happened and why the emergency meeting was necessary. Attach all your evidence. If the AG sees she was acting outside her authority and creating liability for the HOA, they will side with the board." I spend the next 2 days drafting a formal complaint. I attach the covenant sections, the fake fine letter, the police reports, the restraining order, the dashcam footage, the photos of the orange stickers, the boot documentation, and the board removal letter. I explain that Carol was removed in an emergency meeting because she was actively harassing residents and violating court orders. I argue that the board had no choice but to act quickly to prevent further harm. I file the complaint online and receive a confirmation email saying it will be reviewed within 30 days. I forward the confirmation to Luis and Jake. Luis replies saying the HOA attorney is also preparing a response to Carol's complaint. He says they are confident the Attorney General will uphold the board's decision. 3 weeks later, I get a letter from the Attorney General. The letter says they have reviewed both complaints and determined that the board acted appropriately under the circumstances. The letter says the emergency meeting was justified given the severity of Carol's actions and the immediate need to protect residents from further harassment. The letter says Carol's complaint is dismissed and the board's decision to remove her is upheld. I read the letter 3 times. Then I forward it to Luis and Jake. Luis replies saying the HOA attorney is drafting a final resolution to close the matter. Jake replies saying I should celebrate because this is a huge win. But I do not celebrate yet. I know Carol. She is not done. 2 days later, I come home from work and see Carol's car parked across the street from my building. She is sitting in the driver's seat with her phone out recording. I park in my assigned spot and walk to my unit. She does not move. She just keeps recording. I go inside and call the police. I explain that the person with the restraining order is parked outside my building and recording me. The dispatcher says an officer will be out shortly. The officer arrives 10 minutes later. I show him the restraining order and point out Carol's car. He walks over and knocks on her window. She rolls it down. They talk for a few minutes. Then the officer walks back to me and says, she claims she is parked on a public street and not violating the restraining order because she is more than 100 feet from your residence. I say, she is recording me. That is harassment. He says technically, if she is on a public street and not approaching you or contacting you, she is not violating the order. But I told her if she keeps showing up here, I will cite her for stalking. I say, so she can just sit there and watch me? He says, not if she does it repeatedly. If she comes back, call us and we will document it as a pattern of behavior. That gives us grounds to arrest her. Carol drives away before the officer leaves. I go inside and lock the door. I am exhausted. I have spent 2 months fighting this woman and she still will not stop. I call Jake. I say she was parked outside my building recording me. The cop says she is not technically violating the restraining order because she is on a public street. He says, that is a loophole, but it is also evidence she is escalating. If she keeps doing it, you can file for a stalking injunction. I say, I do not want to keep filing paperwork. I just want her to leave me alone. He says, I know. But people like her do not leave you alone until they face real consequences. The restraining order and the board removal are not enough. She needs to know that if she keeps pushing, she will end up in jail. I hang up and try to sleep. But I keep thinking about Carol sitting in her car, recording me, planning her next move. The next morning, I wake up to an email from the HOA attorney. The email says Carol has filed a lawsuit against the HOA, the board, and me personally, claiming defamation, wrongful termination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She is seeking $50,000 in damages. I forward the email to Jake. He calls me immediately. He says, she is trying to bankrupt you with legal fees. Do not respond to the lawsuit yourself. Let the HOA attorney handle it. I say, what if she wins? He says, she will not win. Her claims are baseless and you have documentation proving everything you said was true. The judge will toss it. I say, how long will that take? He says, months, maybe a year. But you will not have to pay anything out of pocket because the HOA is defending the lawsuit. Their insurance covers it. I say, so I just wait? He says, yes. And keep documenting everything. If she keeps harassing you while the lawsuit is pending, that strengthens your case. I hang up and try to focus on work. But I cannot stop thinking about the lawsuit. Carol is using the legal system to drag me into court and waste my time. Even if she loses, she wins by making my life miserable. That evening, I get a text from an unknown number. The message says, you should have paid the fine. Now you are going to pay a lot more. I screenshot the text and forward it to the police. Then I block the number. An officer calls me back and says the text could be considered a violation of the restraining order if it came from Carol. He says they will investigate and follow up. The next day, I get another text from a different number. This one says, I know where you work. I know your route. I am watching you. I screenshot it and forward it to the police. The officer calls back and says they traced the number and confirmed it belongs to Carol. He says they are issuing an arrest warrant for violating the restraining order. Carol is arrested the following morning. She is held in county jail overnight and released on bail. The judge adds a provision to the restraining order prohibiting her from contacting me through any means, including third-party phones and social media. He warns her that any further violations will result in longer jail time. I get a copy of the updated restraining order and put it in my glove box. Then I try to move on with my life. Over the next few weeks, things finally start to calm down. Carol does not show up at my building. She does not send any more texts. She does not file any more complaints. The lawsuit is still pending, but the HOA attorney says it will be dismissed within a few months. The board holds another meeting to review the parking enforcement policy. They pass a resolution requiring all towing and fines to be authorized by the management company and documented in writing. They also pass a rule prohibiting board members from having direct contact with towing vendors. Tom says the new policies will prevent anyone from abusing their authority the way Carol did. Several residents come forward with their own stories of being harassed by Carol. The management company issues refunds totaling over $4,000 to residents who paid unauthorized fines. The towing company agrees to reimburse residents who were wrongly towed. One afternoon, I am making a delivery in the guest parking lot when I see a woman I do not recognize walking through the lot with a clipboard. I tense up, thinking Carol is back. But as the woman gets closer, I realize she is younger and wearing a management company uniform. She introduces herself as the new compliance officer and says she is conducting a routine inspection to make sure the parking lot is properly marked and accessible. I relax. She is not Carol. She is just doing her job. I finish my deliveries and drive home. As I park, I see Tom standing by the mailbox cluster. He waves and walks over. He says, I wanted to thank you for pushing back against Carol. If you had not stood up, she would still be harassing people. I say, I just did what I had to do. He says, most people do not. They pay the fines and move on because they are afraid of retaliation. You are not afraid, and that made a difference. I say, I was afraid, but I was more afraid of losing custody time with my daughter because of HOA nonsense. He nods. He says, that makes sense. Anyway, thank you. The board has learned a lot from this, and we are making changes to make sure it does not happen again. I thank him and go inside. I sit on my couch and think about the past few months. It has been exhausting, stressful, and expensive. But it is over. Carol is gone. The restraining order is in place. The board has new policies. The other residents are getting refunds. The lawsuit will be dismissed. I finally feel like I can breathe. A few weeks later, I get a call from Luis. He says, I have news. The Attorney General issued a compliance report clearing you and the board completely. They found that Carol exceeded her authority on multiple occasions and created significant liability for the HOA. They have ordered the HOA to implement mandatory training for all board members on proper enforcement procedures. I say, what about the lawsuit? He says, Carol's attorney withdrew it yesterday. They said they reviewed the evidence and determined there was no basis for the claims. The case is dismissed. I hang up and sit down. It is really over. Carol has no more moves. She tried everything. Fake fines, illegal towing, restraining order violations, frivolous lawsuits, harassment, stalking. None of it worked. She lost every single battle. And the best part? Her favorite fee, the $300 parking fine she kept demanding, was proven imaginary in the ledger. The management company confirmed there was no such fee in the covenant and no authorization for her to collect it. She made it up. The whole thing was fake. The HOA attorney forced a reversal to reduce liability, issuing refunds to everyone who paid Carol's fake fees and implementing new oversight procedures to prevent future abuse. And in the end, Karen's bluff got read out loud and the room reacted. At the final board meeting, Tom read Carol's fake fine letter into the record and the room erupted in laughter and disbelief. Someone said, she really thought she could just make up a fee and we would all pay it? Another person said, that is the most HOA thing I have ever heard. The final piece came together when a third-party compliance report cleared me completely. The Attorney General's office conducted an independent review of the HOA's parking enforcement practices and found that I had followed all covenant rules and Carol had acted outside her authority. The report was forwarded to the board and the management company and became part of the official record. Carol never returned to a board meeting. She stopped attending community events. Her car disappeared from the parking lot. Someone said she moved to a different part of town. I do not know if that is true, and I do not care. She is gone, and that is all that matters. I still live in Harborview Reserve. I still park in guest spots when I make deliveries. I still see the bright orange stickers sometimes, but now they are issued by the management company, with proper documentation, and I know exactly what they mean and how to respond. The neighborhood feels different now. People are not afraid of the HOA anymore. They know they can fight back if they are treated unfairly. The board is more transparent, and the management company is more responsive. It is not perfect, but it is better. One afternoon, I am walking to my van when I see the couple from the porch, the ones who watched the tow truck scene like it was a show. The man waves and says, "You are the guy who took down the treasurer, right?" I say, "I guess so." He says, "That was epic. We have been talking about it for months. You are a legend around here." I laugh. I say, "I just wanted to park my van and do my job." He says, "Well, you did a lot more than that. You made this place livable again." I thank him and get in my van. As I drive away, I glance in the rearview mirror and see the couple standing on their porch, waving. I wave back. It is finally over. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.